Hello and welcome to the second and somehow last Wisden Ashes Daily from the Perth Test, where England have suffered what must surely rank as one of their worst ever defeats, crumbling from effectively 105 for 1 just after lunch to defeat by 8 wickets less than 2 sessions later. I'm joined by Lawrence Booth from Australia, but first, today's Ashes Daily is brought to you by RIVERSTONE Living, redefining independent living for people over the age of 65. Think a combination of luxury 5-star hotel service, amenities and private members club atmosphere with like-minded neighbours, all built with a well-being offer intentionally built for optimal independence. We're delighted to be working with Riverstone across the duration of the Ashes. Lawrence, I almost feel like when you start this off like Holly Willoughby on This Morning, when she went, right, deep breath, are you okay? I hope so. I imagine you might be feeling a lot like I do, shaken, troubled, let down and full of questions. I mean, what is the mood like over there in Perth among the fans and English press pack as well as among the team themselves?
Yeah, I mean, when a game finishes so quickly like that, you're obviously trying to hit deadlines, and your professional, your journalist head is on a bit, so you're trying to get the words out and press send, and then you sort of have a bit of time to reflect. And I did that a bit on the taxi on the way back from the hotel. I mean, I would say that the instinctive mood was, and this word will probably be used a lot, is shell shocked. As you say, England were, what, 65 for 1 shortly after lunch, and within 5.5 hours, they'd lost by 8 wickets. I mean, they basically gone from pretty well having control of the game and after a strangely quiet first session, total contrast to the mad first day. And you thought, right, they are slowly crushing Australia under their boots here, and whatever they set Australia, the fast bowlers who ran through Australia the night before will finish the job. But things can happen fast here in this part of the world, and the fans kept on singing gamely. I'll give the Barmy Army their due. They were still singing even while Head was murdering a 69 100. But this was a crushing blow for England. They had to win this game. We knew in advance that Cummins and Hazelwood wouldn't be playing. It was a huge chance to win the first test of an away Ashes series for the first time since 1986-87. They looked like they recovered on the first day after collapsing with the bat, but then they collapsed again. They didn't learn some of the lessons that they ought to have learned from the first day, and then they ran into Travis Head, and that can happen sometimes. But how they come back from this is tough, because there was already an 8-day gap between this test and the next. There's now an 11-day gap, and that's going to give them plenty of time to either stew on it, or if Stokes and McCullum have their way, put it to one side and get on with it and tell themselves that they did compete with Australia and they can do it again at Brisbane.
You're right to sort of pick up on just almost how small the window felt for Australia to come back into that game after lunch. Like, it felt like it had to be then or never, because as you say, it felt like England were going to get to like somewhere like at least around sort of 230, 240 to set them. And then their fast bowls were going to be good enough to defend that sort of total. And so the most frustrating thing really is that stretch from 76 for 2 to 76 for 5, when it kind of felt like the wall started closing in. And when, if England had been even, 120 for 5, whatever it is, then it could have been a very different game. I mean, just what on earth happened in that sort of crazy 15-minute spell?
I think so before lunch, Boland had started to hit his line and length, and Pope got into a bit of a tangle against him. He didn't know whether to attack him. When he did, he was generally missing big drives outside off stump or defend him. And actually, why England had played him so successfully in the first innings, Boland, was they hit him off his length. And Duckett did it to start with, and Brooke most sensationally. And he went for a runner ball, and you thought, he's not quite a busted flush, but England have got the measure of him. Now, I think that England's kind of diffidence against him today before lunch brought him back into the game. And then his first over after lunch, he started getting the rewards that he might have got before the break. He got bowled a good one to Duckett. I held no, I don't think Duckett was to blame for that one, but Pope's shot was terrible. He'd almost got out like that several times before the break. Got to 46 in the first innings, got out to a leg stump half volley from Cameron Green, and then get to 33 in the second, and then edged a drive like that. That was poor from the senior number 3. Brooke, 3 balls in and he's driving on the up. Again, what's going on? I mean, this is the exact shot that English batsmen are supposed to be wary of in Australia. And then Joe Root chops on a ball that, bit of a crooked bat. I'm not going to criticise Joe Root's batting technique, but if you were to be ultra critical, you'd say that there was that the angle, the shape of the bat was exactly what you're not supposed to do for English players being brought up on slower, softer pitches. And suddenly they've lost 6 wickets, 3 wickets in 6 balls, felt like 6 wickets, 3 wickets in 6 balls. And suddenly Australia feel like the team who are on the up. And then Stark bowls a beauty to Stokes again. He saved up 2 good deliveries for him. It's 88 for 6. And even after Atkinson and Carse had 50 in 6 overs, which was a decent counter attack, and actually, it showed how easily Australia were put on the defensive. They spread the field. They went after Boland a bit more. It was like, oh, hang on a second, shouldn't they have done this earlier? Even then, 200. You thought, well, yeah, if England bowl like they did earlier, but out walks Travis Head, and you're thinking, Usman Khawaja's back spasm may work out quite nicely here for Australia because had it been Khawaja and Weatherald, I think England would fancy the chance of a couple of early breakthroughs. But with Head, the one-man Bazballer, you've always got the thought at the back of your mind that he could do something, ridiculous, and he did. And the pitch lost a bit of movement. The bowlers weren't as quick or as energized as they were on the first day. You throw these things together, and the crowd went wild, and suddenly England were, everything ran away from them. So I think that's what happened. Basically, they messed it up.
Yeah, yeah. It is interesting how you put it because there are, and England fans probably won't see it this way right now, and they probably won't even be thinking about the sort of the context of Head's innings as they're frustrated at England's dismissals. But there are still two sides to attacking batting, aren't they? Like as you mentioned with Boland, if you're allowing him to bowl, and also you saw it with England with the ball. Like you think back to the first innings, and Australia got through the first 14 overs just losing 1 wicket, but it didn't really feel like it. It felt like England were all over them, and yet Head gets a few away so quickly. And then so I don't know also what to read into England with the ball, whether it's that their attack might click sometimes, but Australia's are going to be more consistent, and so you're going to get days like, or else sessions like session 2 or the last session of day 2 here, and you're going to get sessions like the last session of day 1, or whether it's that they were just kind of shell shocked at the position that got away from them, and then Head comes out and puts them on the attack and puts them on the back foot, and the field spreads. Do you think it's more that they just got beaten by a good player and there was kind of no answer, or do you think that there are sort of more cracks in England's bowling than we kind of maybe thought this time yesterday?
Head is a special talent when he gets going, and he made the comment before the series that if the pitches are a bit spicy, that will suit him because it'll encourage him to take some risks, hit out before you're got out. And Stokes made the point after the game that the 2 players who had most success counter-attacking, which was Brook in England's first innings and Head in Australia's second, were the ones who tried to hit the bowlers off what was a quite dangerous length at Perth. It was a quick pitch, it did a bit, and in a way that was perfect for the Bazball mentality of hit the bowlers off their length, put pressure on the opposition. And England will argue, and they did after the game, that they left Australia needing the biggest total of the match, 205. No team had scored more than England's 172 in the first innings. So they're sticking to their guns on that one. I don't think there's going to be any rowing back. I mean, I think once Head started hitting them off their length, they went to suddenly they didn't have that many runs to play with. By the time they'd said they got rid of Weatherall for 23, they had 75 on the board in 12 overs, and suddenly they only need another 130. And so they obviously started going funky with the field. So I don't blame them for that. Head was just better than they were. The interesting thing now will be they're clearly going to get stick if they keep playing the way they have been batting, especially in that little mad hour after lunch that we spoke about earlier. If there's no sign that they've learnt about the sort of tweaks you need to make in Australian conditions, I think that will really anger fans. I've written a big piece will be tomorrow's Mail on Sunday about the batsman's failure to adapt, and it's all very well saying that we have this mentality, but good players adapt, and England did not adapt today. And Root seems stuck in his own little mini drama about scoring 100. I mean, he managed 0 and 8, which was his lowest match aggregate since his final test as captain in the West Indies in March 2022. So he looks as far away as ever. And if that's the case, you need more from the rest. I mean, we haven't even gotten to Zach Crawley's pair, for goodness sake, because something like that just seems sort of so run of the mill that it seems barely worth a mention. But 172 and 160 odd. They were in total. They lasted 67 overs. They haven't lasted as few as that since 1904. This was an all-time shellacking, and they've got to sort it out for the next test.
The one thing that's interesting, I guess, is when you talk about adapting, and it's bang on that like it just felt like, and it felt like this actually yesterday as well, that Australia didn't need to be too clever to work England out. Like they kind of knew exactly how they were going to play, and that can make them quite easy to plan for, I guess. But one thing I can't work out in terms of adapting in this game in particular is what was this pitch actually like? Because you look at the at least the scorecard for the first three innings, and it looks like a bit of a minefield. Then you look at how Travis Head batted, you look at how some of England's tail enders batted today, and you think that maybe it wasn't so bad. And I think what I've landed on is that it was very, very quick, so that when there was a little bit of sideways movement, it's kind of compounded and has the effect that a lot of sideways movement would have had on like a slower pitch, because the reaction time is so much less. There was a bit of swing at times, but maybe it had started to ease up possibly by the second half of day two, as you saw with Atkinson and Carse, and then with Head. And then if you agree, it kind of only makes England's innings more frustrating, because there's playing the conditions, and there's also playing the match situation, where it felt like Australia they were maybe a session and a half off being pretty close to breaking point some of that bowling attack. Like Boland had to go off for a bit, Lyon was off a bit. It felt like a lot of sort of running repairs. It is an ageing team, and England just, if they got to that 30 over mark, even 4 down, maybe they'd have had a real chance. Instead, it was 7 down, and that was kind of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think Ricky Ponting was saying earlier in the day that the pitch will be best for batting in the sort of afternoon of the second day. So, at lunch when they're 1 down, you're thinking, if they have a sensible session, I know sensible is a silly word with this team. That's not their adjective. But if they only lose, say, 2 wickets in this session, they should win this game. So that will be a frustration. They didn't bat their way through to what Ponting said would be the best conditions, and the way Head batted kind of backed him up. I thought it was a perfectly good pitch. I mean, I know that there's sort of arguments raging online about what constitutes a good pitch, and if 19 wickets had fallen on the first day in another country, then we'd all be going on about the surface in a way we haven't here. But what happened over the first 3 innings, I thought, was that Stark bowled beautifully. Stark was a one-man band in the first innings. He bowled so well that it didn't matter that Boland was hit off his line, or that Doggett was easing himself into Test cricket, or that Lyon was irrelevant. And then England bowled as well as I've ever seen an England seam attack bowl. I mean, all 5 of them were at Australia, and encouraged most of us, I think, to think that England have got a chance in this series. And by the way, there are 4 games to go, so let's not write them off. They do still have a chance, because if they can reproduce that for 3 of the next 4 tests, they do have a chance. So they bowled beautifully against Australia, and then we've discussed why England's second innings went wrong. The pitch was fine all the way through, really. It was a sort of freakish set of circumstances that no team had topped 172. So, where do England go from here? I think they've just got to. They will try to stay as tight as possible. Stokes spoke about not taking any baggage to Brisbane. I get that. You can't dwell on these things. They will have to dwell on it for a bit. I mean, they've got a long gap now between that game. The Bazball thing is all about not letting in the outside noise. That's one of their favourite phrases. And a few of us spoke to McCullum afterwards. That's still very much his position. But fans will want to think that there's going to be a bit of reflection going on, because if they see them making the same mistakes again, Einstein's old quote about definition of madness, that will drive the fans mad, and we can't have that.
Just to cover it off, I guess the controversial moment, if you want to call it that, with Jamie Smith's dismissal, sort of given out, not out originally on the field, and then after a 5-minute, I think we counted up to DRS review, where there's a spike on Snicko, but it's definitely not when the ball is next to the bat. But we're kind of told that the TV umpire has sort of like a frames leeway, which says that the ball has hit the bat, even though if it's in one of 3 frames, if there's a spike, then that will count as the ball hitting the bat. And so I've sort of come to terms with that due process was followed, that maybe it wasn't a total shocker. But can I be angry at real-time Snicko? It just feels like bad technology. If there's a spike when the ball is somewhere close to the bat, a frame before or after, maybe that he's probably hit it. That's not great technology. And maybe if we can't take anything we can take from the fact that, good British Ultra Edge has at least got the best technology.
Yeah, I understand fans' anger, and there's certainly some angles and pictures and stills of it where you thought, well, it's not near it on the front on, and it's not near it on the side on. Perhaps that, Australians might argue you'd missed a frame there. I thought for me, the decisive moment came when Smith started walking off, when the moment he saw that tremor up on the big screen, and that was a daft thing to do because that was telling the third umpire, that was making the decision for the third umpire. Now, had he just stayed put, and sort of, had his body language been a bit more smart, shall we say, that might have made it harder for Shah Abdullah, the third umpire, the TV umpire, to make that decision. I didn't actually have a massive problem with the decision. I thought there was an angle where you could argue that it brushed something. I can't think what else it would have been. It was such a small spike that I didn't think it was a kind of boot scraping along the turf, which I think might have happened with Labuschagne the day before when that tremor was a bit longer. And I could see why that decision was not out. But I think Smith did himself in there. He's got to be a bit smarter about that. You're not going to win these Ashes if you sort of you start walking off and help the officials make their decisions.
Well, that is all for today's Ashes Daily in association with Riverstone. But for more, head to our Patreon for our after show, where we'll discuss what this means for the series as a whole, who's playing for their careers, and where England could go next. Thanks to Riverstone for supporting the Ashes Daily, luxury London living that keeps you independent, inspired, and connected. If you don't feel like slowing down, but rather enjoy more of life, head to www.riverstoneliving.com and get in touch with them for a tour today.